Hi there, it's Mark back with another Lightroom tutorial, and today we're going to look at a series of tips and tricks to do with Lightroom itself, arranging panels, helping us do cropping, giving us more precision and control over using the sliders, and a few others. I think there's around about 10. So that's what this is about. Periodically on the channel I will throw one of these in where we'll go through and look at some tips and tricks rather than the detail of a feature or the detail of an edit. So if you want to learn how to control your slider, how to get more control over it, how to get more workspace back and view your pictures in a little different way, then stick around. I'll play the titles. 8 seconds time, we'll dive into it. See you very shortly. Alrighty, here we go. Tip number 1, and I'm not going to keep counting them. But this is tip number 1. Over time, when you're editing picture to picture to picture in your develop module, you might find you end up with a cacophony, an expanded set of panels. And just to give you an example, if we're editing this picture and I want to adjust the exposure, and I think, okay, that's kind of where I want it. I'm now going to finish the whole picture off with a little bit of a vignette. I scroll down. And I scroll down. And I scroll down. Have you lost the will to live yet? And I scroll down. Oh, there it is, vignetting under effects at the bottom. And I add a little bit of a vignette. Job's a good one. Oh, now hang on, that looks like it needs exposure adjusting again. So let's go all the way back up. And let's go to exposure. You see the problem? I don't like that. And my OCD hates that. So just by right clicking on one of the titles, I'm using basic here, whoops, and choosing solo mode, all the panels close bar the one you're working on. And that is a real good time saver in my book. So if I wanted to do that vignette now, I click on effects, basic closes and effects open. If I want to do some color grading, let's go color mixer, which is one of the bigger panels, effects shuts and color mixer opens. The advantage here is each and every block is always on your screen. You don't have to go scrolling for it. Do you really need to see the basic panel open when you're actually in Color Mixer? I reckon no. So why bother? Just put it into solo mode. Right click, choose solo mode. Incidentally, you can collapse all and expand all, but over time they do fill up. But if you put solo mode in, only one will ever be open at the same time. Only one at the same time? Is that an oxymoron? Anyway, tip number 2 is to do with your sliders and a little bit more control. So if I'm moving this slider, trying to get the highlights right in this picture, I can go -100 to +100. Okay, that's fine. But it's over a relatively short space on my screen. If I grab a hold of this, click, hold, drag to the left, I've now increased that slider width twofold. I haven't quite measured it, but by eye I think it's roughly 2 times as long, which means that albeit it's the same bound, it's still -100 +100, I've got a much larger slide to get between them. Therefore I can be more precise in moving my slider. I can be more measured. I'm giving myself more incremental steps. We'll come back to incremental steps in a little while. Next tip, don't know what number, 4 is a guess. Anyway, next tip is to do with distractions while you're editing. So I tend to have a grey border around, but changing the colour of the border can be advantageous. It gives you a slightly different look on a picture. You've been editing a picture for a while, it's easy just to right click, stick it into white, because that makes that picture look different. When you go away, have a cup of tea, come back, stick it in white, you'll get a different view of that picture. Right click, black, you'll get a different view of that picture. So if you're precious about a particular picture, you've been working on it for a while, you really want to just make sure that it is what you want, try that. Also, if you intend on framing something in a black frame or a white frame, do that and have a look to see what it looks like. So you get an extra extra little benefit from that one. Put mine back into some sort of dark grey. Lightroom can also completely isolate your picture. It's called lights out. L for lights out. So if I press the L on my keyboard, then all of the desktop barring the picture goes very dull. I mean, I'm still up here somewhere. If I press L again, I'm not. It's completely black. It has totally removed everything except for the picture. And if I do L again, then it comes back. That is a very useful feature for switching off all of the panels and things that you might have open around. L, lights out. Next one. We're working through this picture. We're doing an edit, incrementally editing things, put a bit more clarity in. And I want to see the progress to date. What does this look like compared to my original? That's the backslash key. So I press that. That is how the picture was initially. That's where I've got it to right now. Backslash off and on. It toggles between the two. There is another one I'll throw in here, which is the Y key. The Y key gives you, and you can configure these, but the Y key is giving me a before, which is what the backslash did, and an after. The difference here is I can actually continue my edits. So I can take all that clarity down, I can take the clarity up, I can take the saturation down or up, but I've still got the original as reference. So I'm seeing it side by side. So one of them is constantly replacing before and after, and the other one has them side by side. So Y again to switch that off. The next feature, everyone I hope would know this, you load your picture into Lightroom. You can do this on import. That's something else we can address in another video, but it's to click auto. Why ever not? Auto's there for a reason. You saw how quickly it actually brought an underexposed picture there, Control Z or Command Z on the Mac. An underexposed picture immediately brought to life. It takes a lot of the legwork out of fixing a picture. That said, I'm not going to use auto on this, but why not? Unless you've got some sort of stylization in mind, somewhere you're heading to, and you're just doing some general editing, then auto's a friend. Control Z. On this particular picture though, just to do a little bit of an edit, I would want to bring the highlights down and enriching that sky with some yellows. Throw some clarity in. My OCD says you have to straighten that crop. So let's go to the crop tool, and I'll use the spirit level to find a point which should be horizontal. Click, drag to another point and release, and now that is horizontal, and I can switch that crop away. Now I want to bring the shadows up to bring back the foreground detail, and I'll probably add a little vignette. I said at the beginning this, it wasn't an editing video, but guess what? This particular one has. There you go. So auto is your friend. Next one, we want to crop something. Let's find a crop picture. Right, let's do this one. I want to crop this one. So how do I go about using the crop tool? Well, we all know the crop tool. You click on it and then you can actually, it's already been cropped. Let's click reset on this picture. Right, so there's a picture. We click on the crop tool and we can start moving and dragging it in from any one corner or from any one side. But if I wanted to get this middle piece, I would bring it to there, possibly move it down, start doing that sort of thing. Under crop, there's an aspect, and I mentioned this to someone the other day and they hadn't realized it was there, which made me think possibly it's not common. So aspect allows you now to define your crop there and then on the screen. So if I just drag from there to there, there's my crop, and that was much quicker than pulling in from sides and corners, and I just close the crop off. Okay, let's reset that, Control Z. So when you enable your crop, you get a grid. Now some grids are more helpful than others. I find very rectangular grids fine. However, if I press the O for options, or I don't know what O stands for in this sense, but O, it cycles through various on-screen, O for on-screen, no, various on-screen options to help you measure your crops out. And you might find one more useful than the other. You might, for a particular purpose, or you might decide, I like rules of thirds a lot, so I'm going to leave that one as my option. And if we come out of crop, go into another picture and go back into crop, that grid is preserved. Okay, unless I press O again. On the subject of cropping, another tip on cropping is when you crop, you have the option over here of going in and choosing some fixed formats and define your own. Well, let's just choose a, I don't know, 16 by 9. And it immediately locks it. So now if I bring any edge in, it'll preserve that aspect ratio. So let's say that is what I'm interested in. But I want the orientation the other way around. I want it to be portrait mode. So where is the portrait mode on there? There isn't. Can I come to the side and turn it round? Not quite. So how do I get that portrait mode? Let's just go back to where we were. 16 by 9. How do I get that portrait mode once I've got a fixed aspect ratio? You just press X and it changes it round. Now, is that tied into the fact I've got fixed ratios? No. Let's release the padlock and just design our own crop that it looks like nothing that you'll see over there in the fixed ratios. And let's do X. So that works too. That's a very quick way of just turning your crop through 90 degrees. And I find that very useful at times because I like to do portrait style, and a lot of these default to more of a landscape side, basically because the initial picture is in a landscape format that came out of my camera. What else have I got for you? Oh yes. Don't be frightened to be slapdash. I'm going to edit this picture just a little bit. What I want to do is recover things from the highlights from the sky. So let's bring detail from the sky. Sorry, let's bring the highlights down. Let's take clarity up. Let's bring exposure down. Let's target all that on the sky. Let's put a mask in. Oh, I've already got a mask. Let me reset this entire picture. There you go, reset. Let's go again. I'll just go straight for the mask. Sky. It detects the sky. I will bring my highlights down. I will bring my clarity up. I'll try a little bit dehaze. See if I can bring any detail in. That's a very flat sky. There literally is no detail to come out there. All I'm doing is darkening it. And yes, that takes some of that out, but you get fringing here. And this starts to look a little bit more unnatural because the sky is reflected usually at the horizons or borders or natural places where it ends and something else begins. So I think in something like this, I would delete that and I'd probably just go straight in for a linear gradient and drag the linear gradient down. And I don't care that it's come below the sky, it's come into the sage building, it's come into the awnings here. And now I'll do the same thing. I'll bring the highlights down. I'll put a bit of clarity in there. Possibly a bit of dehaze as well. Exposure down a little bit. And I would argue that is a better picture, a better edit on that picture than before because it blends that sky in. Now, the secret here, it is slapdash, is the size of the gradient. If we were to have that gradient very fine, you can see defined lines. You now got your eye on that line. If I bring it down, you can see it's still there. So don't be frightened to be slapdash, but give it a nice gradient to work on. I've got no idea what number I'm up to now, but I know I'm roughly at the end of the ones I wanted to share. Oh yes, finally we're going to look at controlling your sliders. So we've already made these a bit wider to use. Do I have a different picture to work on this one? Oh, we'll just stick with this one. Develop, D for develop. Right, we've already got a picture to work on. We've already talked about making these wider, but if I hover over any one particular slider, in this case I'm over the exposure, if I press my down arrow, it drops it by 1/10 of a stop, or let's just call them units. It drops it by 10, 20. These are down arrows, 30, 40, 50. So I can actually very precisely use my arrow keys up and down to actually make that change. I can use the slider and look at that number. I can even come over here and type a number in. 54. Whoa, hang on. 4. Really overexposed. 54. Click on exposure to reset it. In fact, clicking on any of these will reset the value to the middle. And if you've done lots of changes, I'll throw an extra tip in here. If you've made lots of changes, clicking on the word tone resets them all. Rather than the reset, which will reset everything else you've done, that is just in this tonal group. Anyway, back to this. So we're on exposure. Let's click auto. We're on exposure. I'm hovering over it, and I can go up in increments of 10 or down in increments of 10. There's 5, 15. I'm just reading my numbers over here, and back down. I can go bigger steps by holding down my shift key. They'll go up in 1/3 of a step. Let's just reset that. So if I hover over it and I hold my shift key and I go up 0.33, 66, 99, down with my down arrow key, holding my shift key all the time, they are bigger steps. Now if I want to be really precise, shift and alt, or is it just alt? It's just alt, or option key on a Mac. If I hold down the option key now, I'll reset it first just so you can see numerically what it's doing. It's 1/50th of a stop. So hold my alt key, press up, it helps if I hover over it. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 and down. So you can actually get very precise adjustments in without even having to wiggle your mouse. So let's come over to the blacks. I'm just hovering over the blacks and I'm going to come down using my arrow keys, and I'm holding my alt key, so it's just going 0.2 at a time. So there you go. That's one way of introducing far more control. Finally, on control is the tone curve. I'm going to do a video on the tone curve because the tone curve is very powerful and rarely used to its true potential. One of the issues with it is, though, it's global, but you can actually use it within a mask, and that's what I'll do in a future video. However, the tone curve, we've got blacks down this end, we've got mid-tones, and we've got whites at that end, or shadows, mid-tones and highlights. And if I bring this down here, I'm actually darkening the shadows. This end was the highlights, so if I push this up, I'm lightening the highlights, and that's the traditional S-curve. However, the tone curve is tiny little bits make quite a big change, and one of the reasons I think people don't use it is just resetting it by clicking on the adjust. One of the reasons I think people don't use it is because they move it a little bit and they get big results. Well, there is a way to actually slow this down. If you hold down your option key or alt key as you drag it down, it's really slow in moving. So if I click without that and drag it down very quickly, now I'll keep moving my mouse at that pace. All I'm going to do is press my option or alt key. I'm having to drag all the way down there. So what I've immediately introduced here is a fine degree of control. So the tone curve, it's its almost enemy because of how responsive it is. But when you learn that the option key or alt key stops it from being a runaway train and allows you to actually be very measured in your control over where you put those values, it becomes far more powerful a tool. And I think I've ran off the end of the list as much as I remembered in my head. If this is the sort of thing you're interested in, let me know in the comments. I'll throw these in occasionally. Sometimes we might look at particular tools and dive in on tips, tricks and techniques on those. Other times it'll be just more generic stuff around this, about Adobe Camera Raw, and we will build up all the little bits of knowledge, all the little gems that might make your Lightroom journey a little bit easier. I'm out here. There's a cup of coffee when I'm on it. Click on that subscribe button if you like that. Click the like, give it a thumbs up. Helps the channel, tells YouTube people are liking the stuff, helps put these videos in front of other people, which then in turn gives me more motivation to churn out more content. Yeah, that's it. I've gone. Bye.